You won't believe what just went down with the Harris family. This one shook the entire hip-hop world to its core. The music, the fame, the flashing lights, all of it suddenly stopped. The world that once saw King Harris, son of rap legend T.I., living wild and shining bright, was now watching him fighting for his life inside an ICU. The scene was heartbreaking. King's face pale, his body hooked up to machines, tubes snaking out from every angle. Nurses rushed around while doctors whispered behind closed doors. T.I. and Tiny stood frozen behind the glass, tears rolling down their faces, unable to believe what they were seeing. Their boy, the one who had the world in his hands, was now lying motionless, clinging to life. Fans flooded the internet with shock and confusion. People who'd watched King flex cars, fame, and luxury online couldn't process the reality. He was barely breathing. But what really sent chills down everyone's spine was this. It wasn't just some accident, and it wasn't some random prison fight. Nah, this was darker, way darker. That evening, sources say King was keeping to himself, trying to stay cool, trying to avoid drama. He reportedly told people he just needed some space, maybe to think about what was next, maybe to plan a fresh start. But only minutes later, chaos exploded. Shouts echoed down the prison corridors, alarms blared, and guards sprinted like something out of a nightmare. When it was over, King was on the ground, beaten, unresponsive, gone cold. Witnesses say the way it happened didn't look random. It looked targeted. Every injury was clean, brutal, and intentional, like someone knew exactly what they were doing. And then came the craziest part. The security cameras mysteriously shut off just minutes before the attack. No footage, no witnesses, nothing but whispers in the dark. How convenient is that? It's almost like someone made sure there'd be no evidence left behind. By the time T.I. and Tiny reached the hospital that night, the damage was done. They were crying, shaking, calling out their son's name, but King didn't respond. Machines kept beeping faintly, the rhythm of a fight between life and death. Nurses whispered about how critical it was. Outside, crowds began forming, fans, friends, and strangers alike, lighting candles, holding signs, and begging for a miracle. But behind the prayers and hashtags, something else was brewing. Fear. People were starting to ask the questions no one wanted to say out loud. What if this wasn't random? What if someone wanted King gone? For a reason? Whispers from inside the prison spread like wildfire. Sources claimed King had stepped on the wrong toes, not just with inmates, but with people higher up, the kind you don't mess with unless you've got a death wish. And if that's true, then this wasn't just another headline. This was a hit. The rumors hit the streets like wildfire. King Harris might have stumbled on something he was never supposed to see. Word from inside said he'd found out about some secret deals going down behind those prison walls, money being passed under tables, contraband flowing through the same hands that were supposed to be guarding him. If that was true, then King wasn't just another inmate. He was a liability. And in prison, liabilities don't last long. Here's where it gets real suspicious. When T.I. and the family demanded to see the security footage from that night, the warden had the nerve to say the cameras malfunctioned. Not one clip survived, not a second of video. Gone, just like that. How does that even happen in a federal facility? Something wasn't adding up, and everybody could feel it. Witnesses said T.I. completely broke down. The man who built his whole career on pride, power, and composure looked shattered. Reporters caught him outside the ICU, barely holding himself together as he said, "I don't care about justice, I just want my boy to live." You could hear the pain in his voice, the kind of pain only a father can feel when the world starts slipping away from him. But that one line set off a digital storm. Fans flooded social media asking, why'd he say that? Did T.I. already know this wasn't some random fight? Did he already know who was behind it? People started connecting dots, real or not, and every theory made the story darker. Then came the leak that broke the internet. A voice note from a nurse at the hospital whispering, "This wasn't random. Someone wanted him gone." Just 6 words. But those 6 words flipped everything upside down. Suddenly, it wasn't just a story about a young man fighting for his life. It was a story about corruption, betrayal, and silence. The vibe shifted overnight. News anchors, bloggers, even celebs started digging, trying to piece together what was really going on behind those prison walls. Inside the ICU, the tension was thick. The doctors warned the family that the next 24 hours would decide everything. Every beep from the monitor sounded like a clock ticking down to the truth. Tiny was crying so hard she could barely stand, clutching T.I. like her life depended on it. Meanwhile, T.I. just stared through that cold hospital glass, whispering, "Hang on, son. Daddy's right here." But while the family prayed for a miracle, the real danger was brewing somewhere else, inside those same prison walls. Inmates who'd seen what really went down were getting nervous. Some wanted to talk, some wanted to hide, and others. They wanted to make sure the truth never came out. And just when the world thought it couldn't get any crazier, the whispers started again. Someone inside was ready to talk, someone who claimed to know exactly who was behind the attack. Meanwhile, in the ICU, King's condition kept swinging. 1 minute stable, the next crashing. His heartbeat on the monitor rose and fell like a storm in slow motion. The entire room held its breath, because everyone knew that if King didn't make it through the night, the truth might die with him. The whispers inside the hospital turned into a storm of dread. Doctors quietly murmured that the swelling in King Harris's brain was getting worse, dangerously worse. The machines around him beeped in uneven rhythms, a haunting reminder that time was running out. Tiny couldn't stop crying. She was trembling so hard that nurses had to help her stand. And T.I., usually unshakable, just stared at the cold hospital floor, a man who'd seen too much death, too much loss, and couldn't believe fate was coming for him again. The air in that ICU felt heavy, like grief itself had taken over the room. It smelled like fear, tears, and prayers. Every second stretched into eternity as everyone waited for a miracle. Just one blink, one breath, one sign that King would open his eyes. But that night, destiny flipped the script once again. By morning, the whispers that had been bouncing around the internet turned into explosive accusations. People weren't buying the random prison fight story anymore. They said this was a setup, a coordinated hit, and the evidence was stacking up. Then came the bombshell leak that changed everything. A prison staff member's voice recording hit the web, claiming the guards were told to stand down minutes before the fight broke out. That one sentence was enough to make the whole internet lose its mind. What kind of fight do guards ignore, unless they were told to? Now everyone was asking the same chilling question. Was someone inside working with people on the outside? Had this been green-lit by someone with power? Nobody had answers, but everyone agreed. Something was dirty. Fans started calling it the biggest betrayal behind bars. The hashtags were trending non-stop. Justice for King, set up inside. Who ordered the hit? And yet the silence from the authorities was deafening. Meanwhile, T.I. was falling apart in front of the world. Reporters followed his every move, every tear, every shaky breath. Cameras flashed in his face, trying to capture his pain. At one point, he broke down completely and said, "If my son doesn't make it, the world's gonna burn." That sentence lit the internet on fire. Was it just the raw grief of a father losing his son? Or was it a warning? People started to wonder if T.I. already knew who was behind it. And then, the situation took a dark twist. Out of nowhere, a few old enemies from T.I.'s past started posting cryptic messages on social media. One rapper dropped a chilling line that sent shivers through every fan base. "When you play with fire, it reaches your family." That post blew the internet wide open. Within hours, conspiracy threads flooded X, TikTok, and YouTube, fans connecting dots, digging up old beefs, and guessing who could have ordered the hit. Some pointed fingers at rivals from Atlanta, others at old business partners or enemies from T.I.'s early days in the game. Nobody knew what was true, but every theory made the story darker. And just like that, the tragedy stopped being about one young man in a hospital bed. It became a war of emotions. The world split in two, those praying for King's recovery and those demanding revenge. Because in moments like this, hope and hatred start to sound the same. Atlanta was on fire, not with chaos, but with pain and fury. The city that once danced to King Harris's music now moved in grief. Streets were lit with candles, posters, and broken voices screaming, "Justice for King!" Crowds stretched for blocks, mothers, fans, even strangers who'd never met him, all standing shoulder to shoulder demanding the truth. This wasn't just about one boy in a hospital bed anymore. This had become a battle between the people and the system. Everywhere you looked, people were crying, chanting, and begging for answers. Atlanta was done being quiet. They didn't want another statement, another headline. They wanted names. They wanted accountability. They wanted to know who did this and why. Then came the moment that shattered millions. A video of Tiny collapsing in the hospital hallway went viral overnight. You could hear her voice breaking through sobs, screaming, "They wanted to kill my baby!" Her words echoed across timelines and news broadcasts, haunting anyone who heard them. While the internet exploded with heartbreak and rage, the doctors delivered the news the Harris family feared the most. King's injuries were catastrophic. His skull had taken massive trauma, the kind that doesn't happen in a simple fight. Sources claimed the weapon might have been a padlock stuffed inside a sock, a prison-made weapon used for one purpose only: to kill. This wasn't rage. This was execution. Every wound told a story of precision, calculated, cold, intentional. And the craziest part, the guards were right there. They saw the chaos unfold and still did nothing until it was far too late. The Harris family was furious. They had believed that even behind bars there were lines, unspoken rules that protected life. But now, standing in that hospital hallway, those rules meant nothing. Justice had no boundaries, no mercy, no structure. And just as the family started demanding an official statement from the prison, the story took another unbelievable twist. Within days, Atlanta transformed into something surreal, like a scene straight out of a crime thriller. Crowds swarmed the hospital, filling the parking lots, sidewalks, even nearby rooftops. Reporters set up tents on every corner, broadcasting live updates around the clock. News choppers circled overhead as if waiting for a final verdict from the sky. Social media was in full meltdown, conspiracy theories, hashtags, and accusations flying faster than anyone could keep up. Some said it was corruption, others whispered revenge, and a few went even deeper, claiming this whole thing was karma coming full circle from years of unspoken street drama. Then came the shocking twist that broke the internet again. Out of nowhere, an anonymous voice recording surfaced online, grainy, panicked, and full of fear. The voice whispered, "We were told to make it look like a fight, but the target was King." That sentence hit like a grenade. Within hours, it was all over every platform. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, the blogs, everywhere. Nobody knew if the recording was real, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The world froze. Fans started replaying that clip over and over, dissecting every breath, every background sound, trying to find out who said it. And just like that, faith in the system completely collapsed. People stopped believing in coincidences, stopped believing in silence. The story had crossed the line, from tragedy to betrayal. Because one thing was clear now, this wasn't just about a beating behind bars, this was about a setup, a hit that reached straight into one of hip-hop's most famous families. And with that, the question hanging over Atlanta became the one nobody could escape. If the truth was this dangerous, who'd be brave enough to speak it? Cameras caught him storming out of the hospital, shaking with anger, yelling at reporters like a man who'd been stripped of everything. "If you don't protect my family, I'll burn this whole system down," he screamed, a clip that blew up online in minutes and split the internet in half. Some people saw raw, desperate grief. Others heard a warning from a father who already knew too much. Questions piled up faster than answers, and everyone made the story darker. Why did the cameras fail? Why did the guards stand frozen? Why was every witness suddenly too scared to speak? Those silences pushed the truth farther away and made the whole situation feel like a setup. The Harris family sat in the waiting room, hollowed out and silent, broken in ways headlines couldn't touch, while Tiny prayed until her voice gave out. T.I. stared at the floor and out through the hospital glass, as if trying to look into another world. Red lights from police cruisers mixed with the flicker of thousands of candles burning King's name, and the scene outside felt like a city holding its breath. People waited for news, justice, a miracle, anything. Deep down, everyone felt that something huge was coming, something that would change everything they thought they knew about this tragedy. And then the night flipped. The hospital became a fortress with guards at every door, cameras on every corner, and a crowd that chanted until their throats were raw. Inside, though, everything was too quiet. the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. Doctors looked exhausted and worried, and the family had run out of tears to give. Each hour felt like a countdown ticking toward an impossible choice. Days blurred into each other. No sleep, no peace, only the clock and the machines. The doctors warned bluntly. If King didn't stabilize, they might have to consider removing life support. That sentence hit T.I. like a blade. He shouted that no one would make that call over his son's body, and his voice echoed through the halls like both a promise and a warning. People listening couldn't tell whether he was pleading or daring fate. Outside, the city froze as crowds doubled and candles multiplied, a sea of faces holding posters that read, "Justice for King." Even strangers who'd never known the family bowed their heads and cried. But right when it felt like the world couldn't get darker, someone dropped another bomb. A shadowy Instagram account posted a chilling line: "The sins of the father fall on the son." That phrase spread like a match to dry grass and shoved the story into corners nobody wanted to visit. Would you like me to carry this same cinematic, high-tension energy into Piece 6 and keep pushing the timeline toward the reveal? This was never about King. It was about T.I. Those 9 words sent shockwaves through the internet like lightning striking dry wood. The post appeared out of nowhere, just a black screen with white letters, and before anyone could trace it, it vanished. But it was already too late. Screenshots flooded every platform within minutes. Fans went wild, convinced this wasn't E.T. about the young man lying in that hospital bed. This was about his father S. past. The world started whispering the same haunting theory. Someone wasn't trying to punish the son. They were sending a message to the father. Destiny had taken another brutal twist, and it felt like the universe was rewriting the price of fame right in front of everyone. Air's eyes. The Harris family wasn't living a tragedy anymore. They were trapped in a warning. That night, the hospital turned into something between a war zone and a sanctuary. Every corner was packed with reporters, friends and strangers praying, crying, or just standing in stunned silence. Tiny fainted in the corridor the moment she heard the words, "brain activity weakening." Her knees hit the floor, and nurses rushed in, shouting for help. T.I. dropped beside her, his hands trembling as he grabbed hers, whispering desperate prayers under his breath. For once, there was no celebrity, no fame, no bravado, just a father and mother watching their world collapse. Even the nurses started crying. One of them, holding back tears, whispered to a coworker, "They're just parents, just like anyone else." And then it happened, the moment nobody saw coming. The machines started beeping faster. A faint movement flickered across the monitor. At first, nobody believed it. Then a nurse gasped. A twitch, a breath, a heartbeat. For a split second, King was fighting. The room froze. The doctor shouted, "Silence! Everyone quiet!" Every eye locked on that monitor. The green line pulsed, stronger, faster, before fading again. But those few seconds changed everything. That tiny flicker of life felt like the universe saying, "He's not done yet." Outside the hospital, words spread like wildfire. "King Harris shows signs of life!" Fans screamed. Strangers fell to their knees in prayer. Entire blocks of Atlanta erupted into cheers, sobs, and songs. For a moment, it felt like the whole city exhaled after holding its breath for days. The sound of hope echoed through candlelight vigils and car horns honking in rhythm with King's heartbeat. But even in that fragile moment of faith, one truth stayed buried. The truth behind the attack. The prison stayed silent. No investigation updates, no footage, no names, not even an official acknowledgement that anything had gone wrong. It was like the system had swallowed the evidence whole. The Harris family's lawyer went public, calling it the biggest cover-up in state history. Reporters started digging, but every trail hit a wall. And as the night grew colder, T.I. posted a single message to his millions of followers, a sentence that felt like both defiance and prophecy. "They tried to break me through my blood, but we don't fall that easy." That one line became an anthem. It spread across the world, in comments, on t-shirts, painted across murals of King's face. For millions watching this tragedy unfold, it wasn't just a post, it was a declaration of war against silence. Because now everyone knew, the truth hadn't died. It was just waiting to rise. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because even after all the chaos, after all the tears, after the camera stopped rolling and the headlines started to fade, the story still didn't end. Rumors began crawling back through the cracks like ghosts that refused to stay buried. Whispers said the people behind the attack were too powerful, connected deep inside the system, the kind of power that makes people disappear, that buys silence, that rewrites reports before they ever see daylight. Some said the truth was buried inside a classified set of files, locked away, sealed, and protected by names that could never be spoken out loud. Others swore that T.I. knew, that he knew exactly who was behind it all, but was waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment to speak, to strike, to bring the whole machine crashing down. What made this story different was that it had outgrown music, fame, or street headlines. This wasn't about billboard charts or rivalries anymore. This was about survival. This was about justice. This was about a father standing in the ashes of everything he'd built, trying to protect whatever was left of his bloodline. As the first light of dawn touched Atlanta, the city looked like it was holding its breath. The hospital, soaked in orange sunrise, stood silent, a fortress wrapped in prayers. Outside, the crowd hadn't moved. Thousands still stood shoulder to shoulder, hands locked, eyes red from sleepless nights, whispering King's name through trembling lips. And inside that ICU, the soft beeping of the monitor echoed through the room like the heartbeat of the entire city. Fragile, uneven, but still alive. It was as if Atlanta itself refused to flatline. Nobody could say if King would ever open his eyes again. Nobody could promise healing or justice or peace. But one thing was undeniable. This story had changed everything. It tore open the thin line between power and truth. It showed how money could twist justice into silence, how corruption could hide behind badges and titles, and how pain could turn millions of strangers into a single voice. They say tragedy breaks people, but this one did the opposite. It built something unbreakable. You won't believe it, but even in those darkest hours, when every light seemed to fade and every truth was buried under fear, hope refused to die. That's where this story ends, not with answers, not with justice, not even with peace, but with a promise that one day the truth will rise, just like King fought to rise that night, battered, silenced, but still alive, because no matter who tried to erase it, one thing is certain: some stories don't end. They wait.